Reading Renaissance, now after the Black Plague and the end of Crusades. Take a look, it's in a book of reading Renaissance. I can write anything. A creative spark caused a movement of art, a reading Renaissance. Can't forget the great Petrarch. Poetry and philosophy, a reading Renaissance. Reading Renaissance. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of Reading Renaissance. I'm Imani.
And I'm Clemencia.
And I'm Santania. And we're excited to take you back to the 14th century.
You're in for a great surprise. We're about to take you back in time to one of the best stories in history.
It's so nice being in Antwerp. I'm glad King Henry VIII decided to send me here.
Yes, I've been eagerly waiting all day. We could sit down and have a nice chat.
Are you a ship's captain?
Excellent. Two of my favorite intellectuals in one place. This is Raphael Heidelode, a philosopher and world traveler, and this is Sir Thomas More, an ambassador for His Highness.
Oh, I'm pleased to make your acquaintance. I've heard great things. You must sit and hear about my travels. They're absolutely fascinating.
I'd love to. I've been interested for a very long time in hearing about world travels.
Oh, where to start? I traveled with Amerigo Vespucci, traveling to the New World, south of the equator, landing on the island of Utopia. It's quite unlike anything I've seen before. I thought it was a wonder no one had known about it, but apparently someone coughed during the announcement of its location. I think England could learn from this place. For instance, why would you punish thieves with execution when they could just murder their victims and remove witnesses?
Wow, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think you would be an excellent counsel to the king and public officials.
Absolutely not. If I went into politics, I would lose my freedom, and I don't want to work with the royal counselors who could become jealous and cause unnecessary complications.
How did you feel about England when you traveled here?
Well, I had dinner with Cardinal Archbishop of Canterbury, Reverend Father John Morton, who I hear you're acquainted with. And I must say, what I've seen, I don't agree with the politics. The cardinal tried to justify the hanging of thieves to me, and it just doesn't make sense. They could be hurt and not able to work if they're poor. The punishment won't deter them. And the people have no opportunity to be successful because the nobles keep them in poverty. I digress. England had very nice grass, and the sky was pretty.
I really do believe you should counsel the king with this philosophy.
And I must yet again respectfully decline. The Utopians got to where they are by interviewing different travelers, learning about advances in different areas of study and their long culture.
Oh, really? You must tell me more about this land.
It's absolutely fascinating, I tell you. It's beautiful and shaped like a crescent moon. Actually, it used to be a peninsula, but the founder, King Eutopos, dug a 15-mile wide channel to separate it from the mainland.
How are the cities organized?
Each city has no more than 6,000 households, and each family has 10 to 16 adults. Each city is divided into 4 equal parts, and every 30 households are grouped and elect a suffragantis. The 200 suffraganti of the city elect a prince, whom stays for life unless he's deposed or suspected of tyranny. People can be moved around to ensure that there's no overpopulation. Oh, there's also no private property or locks on doors.
I've been silent for a while, but I have this question regarding slavery. Is it permitted?
Excellent question. Every household has 2 slaves that are either criminals or foreigners.
Do people get to choose their own occupations? How does that work?
Well, everyone's required to learn agriculture and must farm for 2 years at a time, men and women. Every citizen must also learn some other trade, like carpentry or weaving. You work 6 hours a day.
Are there scholars? Is there an occupation?
Yes, of course, with their hands selected during their primary education. Every citizen is encouraged to learn during their leisure time.
Are there any dominant religions?
All religions are tolerant of each other, but atheism is despised because they believe in no punishment or reward after death, so it doesn't matter if they break laws. There are monotheists, moon worshippers, sun worshippers, planet worshippers, etc. Some people are now accepting Christianity.
What's something you found interesting?
Something I found interesting are women are trained in military arts but must confess to their sins to their husbands once a month. Dressmakers only make simple clothing and makeup is discouraged. I thought it was interesting how there's not much privacy, but I suppose it makes sense because then you're obligated to behave yourself.
Wait, do they ever go to war?
No, military aid is sent, but they capture and don't kill enemies. It's looked down upon to achieve a victory through bloodshed. Well, man, I'm really glad to have educated you on this matter, but I really am tired and I must bid you farewell.
Oh, of course. Both of you have a good night.
Same to you all.
We would like to take this brief moment to thank our sponsor, Medici. You were always here for us when we needed your wallet. God bless. As you know, I am the ruler of Florence, and someone has told me that you have some insight you feel necessary for me to hear. I am intrigued and would like to hear what you have to say.
Oh, thank you, Your Highness. Please know that my comments come from a humble heart and the utmost respect.
Yes, go ahead.
I want to begin by stating that I've come to the realization that there are different kinds of states.
What do you mean by that?
There are republics, hereditary princedoms, brand new princedoms, and mixed principalities. New states are hardest to deal with. A conquered state may be hard to conquer but easier to maintain.
Okay, I see. Go on.
A prince needs to rise to power by his own means. Caesar Borgia is an example. He had connections and his father's help, but carved his own positions too. However, princes shouldn't rise to power through crime.
What else do you stand for?
A prince needs to have a strong foundation. You can't rely on mercenaries because they can be disloyal and betray. A prince needs to be knowledgeable on war and military history.
What do you find is most important to you?
Here a question arises, whether it is to be loved, then feared, or the reverse. The answer is, of course, that it would be best to be both loved and feared. But since the two rarely come together, anyone compelled to choose will find greater security in being feared than in being loved. Love endures by a bond which men, with men, but being scoundrels, may break, whenever it serves their advantage to do so. But fear is supported by the dread of pain, which is ever present.
Keep your glass up.
Reputation is very important. You shouldn't lie and do things to appear merciful or generous. It's better to be feared than to be loved.
You made some very interesting points, and I will take them into account. You can leave now.
What painting could be more significant than this? The long-awaited creation of Adam is finally here. A marvelous painting done by Michelangelo is the new hot topic in the grandest of churches you can imagine. This masterpiece shows the delightful relationship between Adam and God. Can you really call yourself a Christian if you don't own this one? Buy now! Call for pricing details.
Humanism is the spirit of learning and understanding. It is meant to bring humans to their true purpose and understand the falsehoods in their lives. It is enlightening and brought Europe to its peak for that time. The liberal arts were combined with scholarly aspects and inspired growth in faith. Mass printmaking became standard, which made self-education more available. Bibles were available to the average person, which allowed people to have a direct relationship with the Word for the first time. People began to question the supposed authority of the Church and the Pope. It was the rebirth of Europe and possibly the world.
Today we welcome one of the most stellar men in the Renaissance. Our beloved Petrarch has come all the way from Arezzo, Italy to be here with us, so make him feel welcome. If you have been living under a rock your whole life, Petrarch is the father of humanism and the author of some of the most successful literature pieces of the century. He is even considered to be the man to spark the glorious Renaissance.
Oh, thank you, sir. God bless Italy.
So, as a former law student, I know the crowd is just dying to know. How did all of a sudden you gain interest in literature?
It was always my passion. My father actually, he wanted me to be a law student, so I followed that path for a while. But then something sparked with me. The ancient Rome, the ancient Greek, the literature, it just found my heart the way that law never did.
What was it like traveling as a diplomatic envoy for church?
It was fantastic. I was able to discover so many foreign texts that I wouldn't have been able to discover without it. And I got to use those foreign texts to get me a nice house in Venice to get away from the plague.
Wow. How were you able to come up with such a significant topic like humanism?
I get this question all the time, actually, and really all I can say is just questioning. Having people question themselves and not just go with the way authority tells them to be, not accepting just everything the way it is. It really is liberating to know the true capabilities of a human being.
Did your passion for writing ever interfere with your passion for humanism?
No, actually, they collide, they work together. I credit that to be able to write such fine pieces. And of course, just Laura being so beautiful deserves some credit itself. Understanding and developing an opinion is really one of the main keys to humanism.
As a Latin writer, do you ever fear the language diminishing with this whole societal transformation going on?
No, I think Latin is here to stay. I don't know how anyone could transform such a beautiful language out of Latin. I know people consider me to be part of the reason this whole Italian language thing became trendy, but I doubt it will last.
What do you believe gives people power?
People give themselves power as they want to. It's about analyzing and always looking for new information to understand and spread. Questioning authority, like what gives you the power to be in a higher position than me, because at the end of the day, they are still people, and people can be manipulative just to get what they want.
What do you find is best about being Italian?
Knowing you are part of such an inspiring movement and being the first to do it. We have upcoming artworks and poetry, and it's phenomenal. We have never seen something like this before. Come on, we have the Renaissance man, Leonardo da Vinci. How could we not be proud?
How do you define a Christian?
I believe a true Christian as someone who has love for his faith and has an independent mind outside of the church. They take leadership in immersing themselves in the Bible and use the power the Lord gave them to be people with purpose. Use the mind God gave you.
So your accomplishment with Paris and Rome, tell me about it.
Well, with my reputation positively growing, I received invitations from Paris and Rome to be crowned as a poet. Of course, I kept my loyalty to Rome, and I ended up choosing them.
Okay, our time is running out for this interview, so to go with that, how do you want your legacy to be when you die?
I hope to live to an old age where I can really max out all of my talents, but legacy-wise, I hope I influence humanism to be a lasting movement. I want, when I die, for society to intellectually grow and maybe spread the movement outside of Europe even. I want people to always question and understand their faith and their power. It was an honor to spend the evening with you and the audience. Thank you and God bless.
Il Canzoniere is a series of Petrarch's vernacular poems mainly describing his unrequited love Laura, but also themes of Christianity, dreams, suffering, pain, and happiness. This work contributed to the Renaissance by setting a standard for lyrical poetry. Its significance is also attributed to how it combined classical Latin poetry, Romance literature, and Augustinian meditation. I say that many years had passed since love tried his first assault on me, so that I had lost my juvenile aspect, and frozen thoughts about my heart had almost made a covering of enamel, so that its hardness left nothing lacking. Still no tears had bathed my cheeks, my sleep unbroken, and what I could not feel seemed like a marvel to me and others. Alas, what am I? What was I? Life is ended and evening crowns the day. That savage adversary of whom I speak, seeing at last that not a single shot of his had even pierced my clothes, brought a powerful lady to help him, against whom intellect or force or asking mercy never were or are of value. And the two transform me to what I am, making a green laurel from a living man that loses no leaves in the coldest season. I feed my weary heart on that food, sorrow and grief in which my Lord abounds, and often I tremble and often turn pale, thinking of my deep and bitter wound. But she, who in her life had no rival, comes to the bed where I languish, so that it's pain to me to dare to look, and with pity she sits on the edge. She dries my eyes with that hand that roused such desire in me, and with her words brings sweetness never felt by mortal man. What point in knowledge, I say, that brings distress? No more weeping, have you not wept enough? Now you might live, since I am not dead.
Raphael has come out with the hottest piece of the decade. The School of Athens is flying off the shelves for its intricate illustration of our favorite Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. Our evolution of academics has finally come to life. If you come fast enough, you may even be able to get the original in the Holy Vatican City. If you're a philosophy fanatic, this is the painting for you. Buy the School of Athens now. Call for price and details. Hello, Mr. Moore. Thank you so very much for being here today. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
I'm sure it is. Now let's get on.
Well, Mr. Moore, tell me about yourself.
Darling, don't you kids have something called the Wikipedia nowadays? I'm sure you can come up with much more meaningful questions than that.
Okay, sir. Well, what fostered a thought process that was so unorthodox at that time?
Well, for starters, my parents knew I was a star from the beginning, so they made sure I got the best education possible. So I started my life as a well-educated young man. So when I grew up and began studying under Bishop John Morton and the Chancellor of England, and got exposure to all these different cultures and ideas, I just began to question everything.
When you said everything, does that include God?
Well, it would be foolish to continue to blindly accept every word the church decided to throw at us, especially during those times where the church decided that the king should be separated from the church. which was clearly an act of corruption and just straight oppression.
Would you say your newfound desire for independent thought and enlightenment made you a worse Christian in a way?
On the contrary, I believe it made me a better Christian. If not to be too bold, I'd say the best kind of Christian there is.
Well,
God gave every one of us a brain. If he wanted us to sit down and blindly accept every word of the church, he would have given only the clergy a brain.
what was your inspiration for Utopia?
I looked around and observed all of the foolishness around me, and I wrote a book that had a solution to all the imperfections. I wrote a solution to a problem that no one wanted to fix.
Wow, that's very powerful, Mr. Moore. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm quite a powerful man, and the pleasure is all yours.
Hello, Machiavelli. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey there, fam! What's good? It's my pleasure to be here, homie.
So, Mr. Machiavelli,
Please, call me Mac. Mr. Machiavelli is my 16th century name.
well, Mr. Mach, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Now we just had some discussion about your famous book, The Prince. So tell us, what was life like for you growing up in those times, and how exactly this book came to be?
Well, to be honest with you, growing up in Florence had quite a bit of influence on how I felt about things such as politics. By the time I was no longer just a lad, in Florence there was a strange lottery system in place that determined who was in charge of government and political affairs. And due to the fact that we were under a regime, though I was born in the land, I was never really a citizen. I grew up experiencing so many holes in leadership that I grew up constantly pondering what could be done to change it.
From what I've read, you've done more than just write.
Well, growing up as a scholar of sorts, I was very well versed with words and language. I grew up learning the grammars and rhetorics and the elite language of Latin. But I always felt that to be considered a real man, for anyone to look up to, including my wife of the time, Marietta, then I had to do more than just speak.
So you overthrew the government?
I had no choice. And the way those imbeciles were running the government, it wasn't the hardest thing I've ever had to do either. Medici was making a mess out of the beautiful Italia. So having me appointed as the official government author, as well as the secretary of Dieci di Libertà e Pace,
Say that again.
Dieci di Libertà e Pace.
Don't say like you don't know, it's your book. Just say it.
Yeah. Dieci di Libertà e Pace was simply the right choice to make.
Were there any other influences in the writing of The Prince other than the state of government and in the politics you were submerged in?
Well, being a master of two hats, or whatever you young kids say nowadays, in this century, I was almost always planning or carrying out diplomatic missions and excursions to the court of Louis the Seventh.
Wait, that's a 10. That's the
Yeah.
12th. Because
Yeah, you're right.
1, that's 12.
Okay. Well, being a master of two hats, or whatever you young kids call it nowadays, I was almost always planning or carrying out diplomatic missions and excursions to the court of Louis XII, which would allow my mind to be touched by the ways of the Spanish court.
Did you continue to work in the court forever?
Oh, no, not at all, actually. After being the head of Florentine militia for a while, Medici and Pope Julius II came and defeated my precious Florentines in the August of 1512. While I was very distraught due to the termination of my time on foreign courts, it gave me more time to write at a time where I had a lot more to say. I loved my time in the politics of the Republic of Florence, but I would never trade that time away for anything else.
I do have one last question for you, Mr. Mock. How exactly are you here today in 2018?
Well, when I finally got to meet my creator and my dear mother Mary, they offered me a place in the land of milk and honey, but I felt as if I had not yet completed my calling. I told them that I needed to stay a while longer and continue to learn everything I can about governments and politics and simply the human mind itself.
Well, that sounds like true humanism to me. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Machiavelli.
The pleasure is all mine.